Hello, everyone. Welcome back to DJ and the Zooms. I am Jay, and today I have waited for this specific moment in the afternoon so we could have some sunlight. So let's capitalize on it. We're going to be talking about the Mexican Grand Prix, which happened this past weekend, and there's kind of a lot to say about it. So this time, it's not something that I do every time, but I have taken some notes. One thing that journalists will hammer on about again and again at the beginning of the weekend before the Mexico City Grand Prix is the fact that it takes place at a certain altitude. So it's a Grand Prix where oxygen is a little more scarce than at other Grand Prix, something that they like to talk about a lot. In the end, it's not specifically something that we heard a lot about from the teams and the drivers, but what did make a lot of noise is how slippery it is. From the beginning of free practice, it's been, as it always is, just slip and slide all around. Everybody was slipping and exiting the track limits. So we knew this was going to be something that would play a major role in the Grand Prix itself and in qualifying, obviously. But I don't think any of us were ready for how truly messy the first lap and especially the first corner were. Lando Norris had qualified on pole, which I don't think really was expected. He'd been strong all weekend, but I think I've learned to manage my expectations. So I wasn't really counting on him to be on pole. But he did. He was. What was really surprising, though, was the fact that behind him were the two Ferrari drivers, then George Russell, Max was only fifth, and Oscar qualified in 8th place. He moved up afterwards because Carlos had qualified ahead of him, but had a 5-place penalty after colliding with Kimi Antonelli in the previous Grand Prix. So this is how it turned out, with Oscar moving up to 7th place. Comments were made by the Ferrari drivers saying that they intended on having a very aggressive start. Lewis himself even said, "I have nothing to lose. Lando does," which is true. And we know that starts aren't necessarily Lando's forte. So I have to say I was a little stressed out. I do have faith in him, but I had more faith in him catching up to them if they passed him on the first lap than him keeping his advantage. Hey, I'm not perfect either, although I'm close to it. So with that state of mind for the Ferraris and Max Verstappen right behind them, it was sure to be a very explosive first lap. And we all were dreading the first corner. Dreading and very excited. It is the point of this sport, really. So we were all kind of giddy and excited and terrified all through Sunday. And the first corner, the first lap, the start did not disappoint. Within a few seconds before the first corner, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen were all three side to side, and everyone was sliding all over the place. And it was so messy. I mean, cameras and TV screens can only hold so many cars at the same time within them. And I saw everyone sort of blasting all over, every car going in every direction. The Ferraris leaving the track. And I knew that Max was on their side, so if they were out of the track, Max had to be as well. Coming in front of Lando by cutting through the grass, and then Charles gave back the position to Lando. And Lewis left the track later. But everyone was doing it, and it wasn't very clear what was happening. It was a very exciting start, maybe one of the most exciting in the season. I realized Oliver Behrman had gone up to, I think it was P5 or P4, and he was giving it everything. I think the whole slip inside majorly advantaged him, and then he seized the opportunity and didn't let it go, which was very impressive. And I think we were all rooting for him at that point. Then we learned that Lewis has gotten a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, which was puzzling because it felt like everyone in that first lap had left the track and gained some sort of advantage or not at some point or another. It was very messy. I cannot imagine how much messier it must be for the drivers when they're inside the car going at 200, 300 kilometers per hour, trying to do what they can not to crash into each other and into the barriers and not irreparably damage their car in the grass, which is why it is agreed upon in advance that the marshals will be more lenient when it comes to incidents that happen during the first lap, because we know that I was about to say a very stressful moment in the race. I think all of the race is very stressful. So I don't think that's the exact word that should be used in this case, but it's a messy time. And it makes sense that the people who are directly involved in the whole kerfuffle of cars narrowly missing each other and the walls should be kind of lost in what is going on, and therefore should not be impacted too harshly by the consequences of whatever happened during the first lap. And a 10-second penalty for Lewis at that point felt really harsh. I heard later on this morning, actually, that there would have been the possibility of giving him 5 seconds instead of 10, which would not have impacted his race as much. And I think that would have been more sensible, especially since Lewis had qualified third. And I think everyone is hoping for something good to happen to him at Ferrari in his first year. Lewis joining Ferrari last winter was a change of seismic proportions in the world of Formula One, because he's an iconic driver. He's considered to be the GOAT, and Ferrari is the most well-known, respected, and admired team on that grid, no matter what we would like to say about it. And no matter who you support, we all know that this is the case. Whether it's still understandable or, I was going to say valid at this time, doesn't really matter. It's just a fact. And so those two iconic entities in the sport joining was what dreams are made of, really. And we were all, I think, expecting, I don't know that we were all expecting a lot of it, but it would be a dream. Seeing this great driver who seems to lately have lost his spark back when he was in his last few years at Mercedes, doing great in this iconic, legendary team, I think it would have put stars in all of our eyes. Whoever we were, whoever we support, secretly or not, we're all wishing for something like that to happen. And seeing Lewis qualify third, it sort of made us believe that it was possible. And seeing the FIA give him a 10-second penalty for something that didn't seem so outrageous and happened on the first lap, which is a moment where they are supposed to be more lenient. It seemed unfair to Lewis, and it seemed unfair to all of us. It's a shame, really. But I suppose it is what it is. It seems like Lewis took it on the chin, and I only hope it fuels him for the rest of the season and the seasons to come. Now, someone had a little bit of a crash out during the race. I'll admit, watching the race, it made me giggle. I like it when they blow up on the radio. I always think it's hilarious because they're in such huge stakes environments. It is also serious for them and for whoever is really impacted by the sport. And yet they have these either words of wisdom as Charles would say. Little snarky comments like Alonso is famous for, or full on blow ups. In the case of George Russell, it is so far removed from his reputation and image that it makes it even funnier because it seems out of place for some reason. For context, George found himself behind his teammate Kimi Antonelli, and Oscar was being very menacing, which I guess put George in not only a complicated and difficult situation, but completely pushed him out of any form of respectable behavior. Thinking about it 1.5 days later, and having listened to other creators' analysis of the situation, I do agree that George was completely out of line with not only the way he was talking to his engineer and, by extension, his team and us, because we were hearing him pretty much live, but in the way that the things that he was asking of them were completely ludicrous. He was demanding to be led by Kimi. He wanted to swap positions. Maybe our understanding of the way Formula One works has been tinted by some team orders that have been given in the past few years. It feels like McLaren's almost systematic and desperate attempts at making everything on track and off be fair for both of their drivers and employing multiple position swaps in the process has warped our view of how racing is supposed to be. And by our view, I mean maybe the public, but apparently also some drivers. George was certain that he was faster than Kimi. Maybe at first he was, but his team told him that he should overtake Kimi if he felt like he could. And he didn't. And he found himself attacked by Oscar behind him and completely lost it. He became violent and vulgar in his language until what he was asking for was finally given to him. But by that point, his tires were no longer in a shape that would allow him to go for the driver that was in front of Kimi and himself, which was Ollie Behrman, and he didn't manage to catch him. But in the kerfuffle, Oscar managed to overtake both himself and Kimi. So they lost way more than, well, they lost the position and didn't gain anything. Thankfully, well, good thing he gave back the position to Kimi after that. So both of them only lost one position instead of George losing one and Kimi losing two. But it wasn't a fair demand, and it wasn't dignified behavior on the part of George. I suppose he's feeling the pressure of the end of the season coming up and trying to, well, he justified it as trying to get second place in the Constructors' Championship. I'm not sure that justifies this sort of behavior, which is borderline bullying of the team and his teammate. And that's not how we go racing. Of course, when I say that's not how we go racing, I come from the position of a McLaren fan, where the exact opposite is plaguing our racing, where we're trying to be Care Bear level adorable at all times. And now we have driven millions of people to despise us as a team because of it. Everyone is completely disillusioned with McLaren because of their behavior. So, of course, I can't say that the way they do things is better. Hopefully, there is a middle ground that we can find. Now, as I said, Oscar was the one who was threatening George. It has been a tough few races for Oscar and a tough beginning of the weekend as well. In free practice and in qualifying, he was very clearly far behind Lando. and pretty much nowhere on the grid. He qualified 8th, which is around the middle, and in a McLaren this year, it doesn't make sense. I said last week that I think the pressure of the end of the championship and his position in it is getting to him. He himself admitted that it is a different kind of pressure being the leader of the championship with just a few races to go still. The last few tracks we know are tracks that he struggles more at. And as I said already, I think the end of the season with its challenges and its accumulated fatigue is difficult for him. But on Sunday, he did really well. He found something. Well, he found speed. He had a really strong race. Unfortunately, he started from 7th, which is in the middle of the whole mess. In the first lap, with a lot of cars around you, comes more difficulty, more challenges, more risk of crashing, and, well, you have a lot of people to overtake if you want to make it to anywhere. On top of that, the plague of this year, McLaren's pit stops happened to him. He had a 3.6 second pit stop, which meant he came out of the pits in a very complicated position and had to claw his way back up. In the end, he finished the Grand Prix in 5th position, which I think, given the context of how he's been doing lately, of how he usually does in Mexico, and of what happened during the race to him and around him, is a very good performance. Not good enough to let him keep the lead of the championship, however. Lando did keep his advantage in the first lap and kept it throughout the entire race. I think he led the race from start to finish. I'm not sure, but I think he did, or something close to it. And he finished the race with a 30-second margin to Charles. With Oscar finishing 5th, that means Lando now leads the championship by 1 little point. And Max was 3rd, which means he further closes the gap, reduces it, with 36 points between him and Lando. So, of course, a lot happened in this race. When we were in Austin, the Belgian commentator for F1 TV, who comments in French, was extremely excited as he said, we're going to have a 3-way fight for the championship until the end of the season. This is anything but a boring end of season. And I agree with him because, well, last episode was titled Never Count Max Out. And more than anything, I believe in that. With Lando's newfound form at the end of the season and Oscar's difficulties and irregularities and Max's unwavering drive and commitment, this is going to be a stressful and exciting end of the season, and very probably a 3-way fight for the title until the very end. Now, we still have 4 races and 2 sprints to go, so that's a very short time for anyone to for Lando to stretch the gap, Oscar to take back the lead, or for Max to take it from both of them. I don't think we can count any of them out at this point. I don't think we should. And I would be very hard-pressed to try and make predictions. Now, there's something else that I wanted to talk about, and I will not talk about it for very long because I've been mentioning it in one way or another for months. And this time it's just the Mexican edition. Throughout the entire weekend, Lando was booed loudly and consistently by the crowds at the Grand Prix, be it in off-track interviews of even other drivers. I'm thinking about an interview of Pato O'Ward, who is McLaren's reserve driver, who drove in Lando's car during the first practice session and who was interviewed by a Mexican interviewer. He is Mexican himself, in front of a crowd, and was asked whose car he was going to drive he said Lando, and she encouraged him to and the crowd to boo and disrespect Lando. And then at the track itself, every time he appeared, the boos resounded through the grandstands. I said it last week, I think there's a trend of not liking Lando in the motorsports community. It's not a smart or original idea, and it doesn't make you an interesting person to hate on any of the drivers. There's a level of unseriousness about commenting online in a mean or disparaging way because you're not in front of the person. Very often you will be anonymous in one way or another when you do it. And Lando, in this case, has said that he stepped away from social media so he can, in one way or another, shield himself from online hate. It seems extremely violent to do it in person, although I do believe that there's very probably a large degree of herd mentality where you hear everyone around you do it and so you do it as well. And maybe a lot of people who were booing in the stands didn't really mean it or even didn't really understand what they were doing. But I don't think, even if they weren't following exactly knowing that they were booing Lando or not really knowing why they were booing him, there's no way that you can loudly boo a human being in a context of being a crowd against that one person and think that you're doing a good thing. It's always going to be a mean thing to do, and it's stupid. The only person that deserves to get booed was Christian Horner, who was booed in the F175 event. Or Helmut Marko. No, there are other people. We should boo Flavio Briatore. Boo the real villains is what I mean. Anyway, thank you for listening until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, share the videos, the posts on Instagram, YouTube, etc. And you can still give 5 stars on Spotify. I think that's it. I love you. Bye.